Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this morning. I will be your facilitator and host throughout the next hour. I am Dr. Christine Sequenzia-Titus, and I'm so excited to be joining you today from the Bush Center in Dallas, Texas, which is completely irrelevant, but so much fun to be here. So welcome. We have an amazing group of panelists joining us today. Just a little bit about me. I serve as policy director for the National Association of Evangelicals and also serve as co-chair to the International Religious Freedom Committee eliminating blasphemy and apostasy laws. We are a group of about 35 interested parties that meet together monthly and would like to see an end to the death penalty for blasphemy and apostasy laws. And the major event that we have created over the last 12 months is this webinar, and we hope that you enjoy it, and we hope that it will provide a deeper conversation during the International Religious Freedom Summit that will happen this summer in Washington, D.C. So buckle in, and we will get started very quickly. First, let me introduce you to my co-chairs. They are going to be piping in here very quickly. So I will wait and stall a little bit for them to show up. Here we have Hulda Femi, and I'm also joined by Sheikh Muhater. Sheikh is a survivor, which you will hear from him in just a minute. And Sheikh is also joining us from Paris, France today. He is going to be translated today by Ayman Abdel Nior. And Ayman, you can pop in here as well. There we go. Let's see. And there we go. We've got all four of us in here. Okay, fantastic. So today's webinar is focusing on eliminating the death penalty for blasphemy and apostasy. In particular, we're going to cover 4 different points. First, we'll hear a follow-up on appropriations funding projects, then a highlight the UN Secretary General's annual report. We will discuss upcoming UN General Assembly resolutions, and then also review the 12 nations currently maintaining the death penalty for blasphemy and apostasy laws. So thank you everybody for joining us, and let me turn the floor over to Hulda, who will explain more. Go ahead, Hulda.
Yeah, so thank you very much to everyone who's here, connected. Thank you also to all our knowledgeable speakers who are not only knowledgeable, but also advocates in lifting the voices of those who suffer under these laws. So thank you for being here today and amplifying those voices. So our foundation, or what we base our activities on, is from the Earth Summit last year. And there was an Earth Charter, which emphasizes the need for religious freedom for all, everyone, everywhere, all the time. And this is one of the key action points was the right for every human being to freely believe in religious truth or not to believe, uncoerced by any human authority, especially the state, with its extraordinary powers. And at the heart of the Charter is Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which includes the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, and belief, and the freedom to adopt, and also the freedom to express your religion or belief. And unfortunately, today there are at least 12 countries who have the death penalty, not for a crime, but for exercising this fundamental freedom to choose your religion or belief and to express your thoughts, your deeply held beliefs, what makes you human, your search, what you believe. And this is not okay. We're in the 21st century. All these states have signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Many of them have ratified the ICCPR. So we are here today to address how can we get these countries to comply and to uphold the laws that they themselves have agreed to. And as Dr. Christine has already mentioned, we are looking at the UN Secretary General's annual report on the death penalty, where he made clear that the death penalty can never be imposed for apostasy or blasphemy, for nonviolent conduct. And then we're also looking at the wonderful House and Senate resolutions that passed in 2020, calling for the global repeal of apostasy and blasphemy laws. Following that, there was language included in the appropriations language. So we want to see that used effectively for countries to repeal these laws. And then finally, Jubilee campaign held a side event on the 8th of March, calling for the repeal of death penalty, protecting life, and looking at how to include language in the UN General Assembly resolutions in November. And Anne Bold will be explaining more about that. So we welcome these actions and we look forward to hearing more. So I just want to thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hulda, for that background. Sheikh, marhaba, good morning, kif halak, good to see you. We will let you say hello and then I will introduce you in a minute. Go ahead, Ayman and Sheikh.
مرحبا, good morning. أنا شيخ مخيطر من موريتانيا, مدون وناشط حقوقي موريتاني.
First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sheikh Mohammed Muhater from Mauritania. My story began when I realized the reality of slavery and social stratification in my society. It's an outrageous fact, or if I want to be more precise, it's sacred injustice because it stems from the religious text of Quran and Islamic Sharia. I began writing to express my rejection of all forms of social injustice, whatever its nature. At the end of 2013, I wrote the article, which became the last thing I wrote in Mauritania. And because of it, I was thrown into prison on charges of apostasy and blasphemy. I was placed in solitary confinement in conditions that words cannot express its horror. I spent the first 7 months of my imprisonment without being allowed to shower. During that time, the authorities prevented me from everything, including family visits. By order of Islamic clergy, many demonstrations went out calling to kill me. At the end of 2014, I was tried and sentenced to death. The Court of Appeal confirmed this after my second trial in mid-2016. After nearly 6 years of isolations and abuse, I was released after international pressure and request from several organizations. I was released after stealing 6 years of my youth, during which I tested all kinds of bitterness and violence. I was released after my family was subjected to all kinds of abuse and oppression. I was sentenced to death only because I wrote an article expressing my desire for freedom and social justice. Ladies and gentlemen, time doesn't permit to talk about the details of 6 years of torture and pain. My country, Mauritania, is still prosecuting me with this accusation, and many women and men are being prosecuted for the same accusation. Many women and men were forced to flee this country in harsh conditions with their children in order to save their lives because of the sword of apostasy that the Mauritania government sheds on all apostates. Ladies and gentlemen, this situation must change. It's our duty to grant these people the right to live in their countries freely. I therefore call upon all present and all who receive these words to work hard against the punishment of apostasy for the sake of prosperous future for humanity. In the last, thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Abdelnour. Merci à tous. Je vais aussi lire le texte d'origine en arabe, si vous voulez.
Thank you for all, and I can pass to you the original text in Arabic if you want.
Merci.
Thank you.
What a powerful story, Sheikh, and thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful for your survival and your advocate voice going forward. It is an honor to serve alongside you, my friend. Let's transition now and welcome the Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Mr. Rashad Hussain. Mr. Hussain serves as Principal Advisor to the Secretary and Advisor to the President on religious freedom conditions and policy. He leads the department's efforts to monitor religious freedom abuses, persecution, and discrimination worldwide. He also oversees policies and programs to address these concerns and works to build diverse and dynamic partnerships with the broadest range of civil society and equitable and meaningful inclusion of faith actors globally. Welcome, Ambassador. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you. Great to to hear that you're in Dallas, where I'm from as well. So I really appreciate the introduction, Dr. Sequenza-Titus, and I really want to thank the International Religious Freedom Roundtable Committee to eliminate blasphemy and apostasy laws for the chance to be with you this morning and to speak with you about such an important topic. It is a subject that's very important to me. I remember, in 2010, when I first came over to the State Department for my first assignment as Special Envoy to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. I came over from the White House, and literally the first assignment that I got was regarding what was at that time called the Defamation of Religions Resolution, which was a resolution that had been passed every year for a number of years at the UN. And our objections to that as Americans were that it was a resolution that gave sanction to blasphemy laws and sanction to apostasy laws and restricted speech and criminalized speech, which we totally oppose. And so we worked country by country at the Human Rights Council to eliminate the Defamation of Religion resolution and transition to a resolution that would encourage countries and civil society to address underlying causes of bigotry and intolerance, but not to take an approach which criminalizes speech, and not to take an approach which gives support to blasphemy laws and apostasy laws. And so it's been an important part of my work over the years in government, and will continue to be an important part of the work that this office does. And that's because the United States strongly supports freedom of religion or belief, including the freedom of members for minority religious communities around the world. We support the freedom of all individuals to publicly practice their religion, to change their religion, to speak publicly about their religion, and to teach others about their religion. Everyone, everywhere has the right to exercise this freedom. And that's something that we feel very strongly about. There's 84 countries in the world that maintain laws that criminalize expression that insults or offends religious doctrines or symbols, laws that restrict apostasy, the public renunciation of one's religion, blasphemy, the insult of religion or religious objects or places, and hate speech, generally encompassing communication that prejudices a particular group based on race, religion, ethnicity, or other factors, all limit freedom of expression. Such laws have unique implications for citizens' abilities to express and practice their faith, and empower extremists to take the law into their own hands and to employ violence extrajudicially. Time and time again, we have seen that limiting freedom of expression, including religious expression, increases resentment, increases discontent across society, and decreases societal and political stability. Governments, we know through very clear data that governments that use laws that limit freedom of expression to suppress peaceful dissent and to silence people who could help increase the welfare of and prosperity of society. Individuals often use such laws as a pretext or as an excuse to justify violence against members of other religions, or as a pretext merely to settle personal grievances. We've seen that in a number of countries around the world, unfortunately. Blasphemy laws on their face are inconsistent with the fundamental freedoms of expression and religion or belief enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We have witnessed too many instances around the world, including in Pakistan, in Algeria, in Nigeria, where enforcement of blasphemy and apostasy laws oppresses those whose religious beliefs may differ from the majority. Even in Africa's largest democracy, Nigeria, where the Constitution enshrines the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, we continue to see individuals in some northern states targeted and detained for making blasphemous statements under blasphemy law or under other laws used by authorities ostensibly to keep the peace. And when I say blasphemous statements, I should specify that I say that in quotes because it's deemed blasphemous oftentimes by the listener, statements that may not be in fact deemed blasphemous by the speaker. These individuals risk being shunned by their families and communities, mob violence, lengthy imprisonment, and at worst, sometimes they could even face death sentences. In Pakistan, mobs have actually killed individuals accused of blasphemy in recent years with little or no condemnation from federal government officials nor legal accountability. We have seen some cases in which there have been offers from the federal government for assistance in prosecution and some statements of condemnation. And that's something that of course we'd like to see more of. These laws, which tend to be vague and poorly defined, are often abused to settle personal disputes, silence political opposition, or even retaliate against women for refusing unwanted advances. We regularly call on governments to free individuals imposed on such grounds and to repeal blasphemy, apostasy, and other laws that impede the exercise of freedoms of expression and religion or belief. We will continue to work with partners to encourage reforms, as well as to speak out when individuals are targeted by these laws. We appreciate the partnership with NGOs, academics, and activists like the ones gathered here in your forum today, as well as religious communities. Together, we can make progress against these serious limitations on the exercise of human rights. Freedom of expression, like the freedom of religion or belief, is a universal human right. Yet in close to a dozen Muslim majority countries today, exercising those freedoms can lead to the death penalty. All too often, these laws are wielded against members of religious minorities or even fellow Muslims. In many of these cases, interpersonal conflict unrelated to religion starts a spiral of accusations. Sometimes it even leads to a lynch mob or a vigilante attack. We must be able to build societies where free religious discourse can shape and enrich public discussions. Freedom of religion or belief is not about advancing or protecting one faith or ideology over another. It's about empowering people to choose and pursue a purpose for their lives, guided by their beliefs and religious convictions. And that is true because only when people can pursue their chosen purpose can they fully contribute to their societies. This leads to prosperous coexistence in religiously diverse nations. Communities need not be divided by their unique beliefs or identities. Instead, let's acknowledge our differences. Let's focus on what unites us and embrace our shared commitment to human dignity and allow our shared interests to guide our tolerance of other religious beliefs. Then we can build relationships that maintain peace and increase joint prosperity. Civil society, of course, is critical to the success of this effort. Religious actors and institutions can bring together people of different religions, identities, and backgrounds who have shared aspirations to work for the greater good. Governments play a pivotal role, of course, but they must work with civil society and hear from people within civil society. Governments must make the legal and policy changes necessary to protect religious freedom while recognizing that societal changes to fully accept religious freedom may take time. Governments and the international community can unite to build broad consensus and confront shared challenges to peace and prosperity in a pluralistic society. They can facilitate dialogue between communities about social discrimination, human rights, equal justice, and natural resource management. Ministries of religious affairs, education, youth, and social services also have important parts to play. Their efforts can decrease intolerance, societal violence, and violent radicalization, recruitment, and mobilization of terrorists. I raise the importance of changing these laws wherever I go when I travel around the world. Some of you may know that in my recent trip to Mauritania last month, I took every opportunity with government officials to raise the need to change these laws. I heard repeatedly the response that these changes will take time. My perspective and experiences is that there's no time like the present to start making these changes. Building walls of prejudice and ignorance also has taken time. And of course, it will in reality take time to break down these prejudices. But we must do whatever we can right now as governments and working with civil society to eliminate these laws. We need to work together. So let's work together to pursue greater goodwill, discussion, and cooperation between governments and their citizens. Let's not condone or support laws that decrease harmony, prosperity, and stability in society. Multilateral cooperation is an effective way to mitigate or resolve conflict, promote respect for human rights, and prevent or oppose terrorism. Through this cooperation, we can build a more equitable, inclusive, and flourishing society. For that reason, we rejoined the UN Human Rights Council this year. Having a seat at the table provides us an important opportunity to promote respect for human rights. And we look forward to finding more effective solutions to our shared global challenges. We look forward to working with you for those at the roundtable and I'm honored to be here with you today and to work alongside with you on such important work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Absolutely. We put our full faith in you to be able to build those bridges across so many diverse lines in order to create change, positive change. Thank you so much for being here. We will be back with you shortly for a lightning round question and answer in just a second. For now, let's introduce our next panelist. It's going to be the USERF Chair, Nadine Menza. Ms. Menza is a noted speaker and writer and policy expert with more than 2 decades of experience as an advocate for working families and a champion for international religious freedom. Welcome and thank you for being with us, Chair Menza.
Good morning, and thank you to the IRF Roundtable Committee to eliminate blasphemy and apostasy laws for inviting me to join you today. I'm so thankful for your strong voices, and I'm honored to be a part of this important webinar on behalf of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USERF, where, as you heard, I'm honored to serve this year as chair. USERF is an independent bipartisan advisory body that monitors religious freedom worldwide using international standards and makes policy recommendations to the President, the Secretary of State, and Congress. USERF has 9 commissioners appointed by the President and the congressional leadership from both political parties. USERF is separate from the State Department, but works closely with the Office of International Religious Freedom and the Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. USERF, the Ambassador at Large position in the State Department's Religious Freedom Office, and a senior advisor position at the White House were all created over 20 years ago by the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, commonly referred to as IRFA. Advocating for the repeal of blasphemy and apostasy laws is one of USERF's top priorities. Across the globe, 84 countries maintain blasphemy laws, and at least 23 countries maintain laws that penalize the act of apostasy. In 2017, USERF issued a report entitled Respecting Rights, Measuring the World's Blasphemy Laws. This report analyzed the text of the world's blasphemy law pursuant to international human rights standards. This analysis found that every identified blasphemy law deviated from one or more internationally recognized human rights principles. Most blasphemy laws, even those that impose criminal penalties, were vaguely worded, did not require intent as an element of the crime, and carried unduly harsh penalties for violators. Further, laws criminalizing blasphemy violate freedom of religion or belief. Religious freedom includes the right to express a full range of thoughts and beliefs, including those that others might find blasphemous. Laws prohibiting blasphemy, by definition, place limits on speech and impede free expression over discourse concerning religion. These laws aim to protect religions, but human rights laws protect individuals' believers, not beliefs. Blasphemy laws often empower authorities to sanction citizens who articulate minority views and signal to society that those views are disfavored. In some countries, such as Pakistan, the blasphemy laws aim to support the majority religion in a way that impermissibly discriminates against other groups. Apostasy laws are also inconsistent with international human rights standards as they fail to respect recognized fundamental rights, including the right to change one's religion. Apostasy laws are meant to protect the membership of a religion at the expense of freedom of religion or belief. While all blasphemy and apostasy laws are problematic, the imposition of the death penalty for these crimes is particularly egregious. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights provides that death sentences may only be imposed for most serious crimes. The use of the death penalty for nonviolent acts, including blasphemy and apostasy, constitute a violation of the international human rights law under this principle. The severity of these laws on the books, however, is only the beginning of the story. To appreciate the full impact of the criminalization of blasphemy on human rights, in 2020, USERF commissioned a follow-up report to map and analyze publicly reported criminal blasphemy cases from 2014 to 2018. This report, entitled Violating Rights, Enforcing the World's Blasphemy Laws, identifies global trends in the enforcement of blasphemy laws in nearly half of the 84 countries with criminal blasphemy laws during the period studied. Researchers found 674 cases of state enforcement against alleged blasphemers. The 6 countries with the highest number of cases, Pakistan, Iran, Russia, India, Egypt, and Indonesia, are all countries that USERF identifies as among the worst violators in the world of religious freedom. Pakistan and Iran are among the countries that impose the death penalty for blasphemy, which makes the high rate of enforcement particularly alarming. The researchers also found that Pakistan had the highest rate of mob activity, violence, or threats related to blasphemy accusations, demonstrating how vigilantes are often emboldened by the severity of these laws. Another important finding of the study was half of the 84 countries that maintained blasphemy prohibitions did not actively enforce those laws. We unequivocally call on all countries to repeal blasphemy laws. We particularly implore states where there is no active enforcement to take immediate steps to remove these laws. The abolishment of dormant blasphemy laws acknowledges that such provisions violate international human rights law. Repealing inactive blasphemy laws can also help build momentum towards reform and repeal in countries where blasphemy laws are vigorously enforced by both the state and society. In our 2021 annual report, USCIRF recommended that the US government prioritize freedom of religion or belief in the United States' renewed engagement with the UN human rights system, including at the Human Rights Council. This should include working with like-minded countries, including those in the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance, or IRFBA, to advocate for global repeal of blasphemy and apostasy laws. At the Human Rights Council, members of IRFBA called for an end to the death penalty for blasphemy and apostasy. In countries where repeal of blasphemy laws is currently not realistic, reforms to remove the most severe punishments may be more palatable in the near term and allow for incremental change until full repeal is possible. Beyond continuing to call for the abolishment of blasphemy and apostasy laws and for the removal of the most egregious penalties, the US government can also advocate for religious prisoners of conscience who are imprisoned under blasphemy provisions, including those facing death sentences. For example, as part of USCIRF's Religious Prisoners of Conscience project, my colleague, Commissioner Fred Davey, advocates for the release of Yahya Sharif Aminu, a Muslim gospel musician from a minority Muslim sect whom a state-sanctioned Sharia court in Kano State in Nigeria sentenced to death in 2020 for committing blasphemy in a private WhatsApp message. In 2021, a higher court quashed the death sentence and ordered the case to be retried, but Sharif Aminu remains in detention as he waits his trial. USCIRF also highlights religious prisoners of conscience on its freedom of religion or belief victims list, including several individuals that are on death row for blasphemy. This includes Jeannette Hafiv, of a former university lecturer in Pakistan who was accused of making derogatory statements on Facebook about Prophet Muhammad in 2013. His lawyer was murdered in 2014 while Hafez remained in solitary confinement. In 2019, he was sentenced to death for blasphemy after languishing in jail for over 6 years. Another victim of blasphemy laws is Sina Dengam, who is facing a death sentence in Iran for insulting the prophet. And at the time of his arrest in 2015, Dengam was only 19 years old and did not receive adequate legal representation. These cases represent the many individuals around the globe facing death for exercising their freedom of religion and expression. We must continue to shine a light on these victims of blasphemy laws and call for their release. Thank you again for inviting me today and for hosting this really important discussion. And I look forward to further discussion on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It's always wonderful to see your face, and we will give you an opportunity to share more about USCIRF's reauthorization here in a second. So don't be afraid, we will mention that. So next up, friends, we are going to have a polling question to get you excited and engaged in what we are doing here today. I am stalling so that my co-chairs can come in and our polling question can come up. So you guys, this will be happening through the Zoom link. And when the polling question does come up, you will be able to answer it for us. Is somebody on that? So let's see, polls. Maybe I can share that real fast. Is the polling question not working? Okay, maybe we'll do that after we have our Q&A session. Okay, so let's get started with our Q&A session. Panelists, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to do just a quick lightning round. Looks like we're running about 4 minutes early, so you'll have a little bit more time to share with us just now. So I think if we can get Cher Mensa, Ambassador Hussein, thank you so much for being there. Ayman, thank you. Sheikh, you guys can unmute your mics. And I think at first, I would just like to hear more from Sheikh. Your story is so powerful, and I think it really draws us into what we're fighting for here, what needs to be done, and exactly what you've experienced. So I wanted to give you a little opportunity to share more of what brought you into the situation in the first place. Can you share more about the article that you wrote that caused the story that you shared with us to occur? And then if there is one thing that you can share with the ambassador that he can do in his position, maybe you can share that as well. Will you please translate for us? Thank you.
ممكن شيخ محمد تحطنا بالصورة أكثر لو سمحت بالمقال اللي كتبته، بعض الأفكار اللي فيها، وإذا ممكن لو سمحت يعني أمر واحد لسعادة السفير رشاد حسين، ماذا تقترح عليه أن يفعل من أجلك؟
شكرا جزيلا. فيما يتعلق بالمقال الذي كتبته في نهاية 2013 كان يتحدث عن العبودية والطبقية الاجتماعية يعني داخل المجتمع الموريتاني، وهي يعني عبودية وطبقية اجتماعية قادمة مباشرة من الدين، من الحديث الرسول ومن القرآن.
Yes. ممكن أكثر كمان لأنه دول حتى أكتبهم كلهم عم بكتبهم.
أوكي. هذا كان من ناحية المقال. قدمت فيه أمثلة عن طريقة حياة المجتمع الموريتاني مقابل أمثلة أخرى من طريقة من المبادئ ومن الأوامر الموجودة في الشريعة وفي القرآن. وبدأت أقارن ما بين المسألتين لأثبت أن هذه العبودية التي نعيشها، وأن هذا الظلم الاجتماعي الذي نعيشه، وأن هذا القهر الذي تعيشه المرأة في موريتانيا أنه هو قادم من الدين مباشرة. وطالبت بأن يعني يتم إزالة هذه المسائل القادمة من الدين وتقريبا والاستغناء عن الشريعة الإسلامية بشكل عام. تم اتهام.
لو تسمح لي. نعم. The article he was focusing on the article about the slavery and the social stratification in the society in Mauritania, and he linked it directly with the culture and with texts coming from the Holy Quran and Islamic Sharia, and he asked that to be changed, especially about the text about the woman. So that's what generate all this unrest there. تفضل.
تمت مباشرة من بعد كتابتي لهذا المقال استدعائي من وكيل الجمهورية أي النيابة العامة، وتم إيداعي في السجن مباشرة بتهمة الكفر والردة، وهو السجن اللي قضيت فيه 6 سنوات مثل ما ذكرت في المداخلة. وهذه 6 سنوات كنت مختلف عن بقية السجناء الآخرين، يعني كنت أعذب نفسيا وأعذب بجميع الأشكال وأهان، يعني كثير من الأشياء الكلمات لا تصف نهائيا.
نعم. After publishing this article, directly I was summoned to the district attorney, and I was charged of apostasy and blasphemy. And I was directly sent to jail, which I stayed there for 6 years, and I was treated differently than other colleagues in jail, and it was very difficult time for me. تفضل.
فيما يخص القضية الثانية، قضية المقترحات على سعادة السفير فيما يتعلق بهذه النقطة، أنا أولاً أود أن أشير إلى نقطة مهمة جداً، أنه أطالب جميع العاملين على هذه المسائل سواء كان سعادة السفير أو الآخرين أنهم ينتبهوا إلى منطقة الساحل، لأنها منطقة منسية تماماً، يعني فيها الكثير من السجناء الرأي وسجناء الردة، لكنها منسية تماما، ويتم التركيز على مناطق أخرى يعني نظرا لبعض الأشياء اللي ممكن نفسرها بالمصالح السياسية، لكن أطالبهم بالمساواة في التقارير والمساواة بالنظر لأن في شعوب تتعذب يوميا. هذه كنقطة أولى. النقطة الثانية.
As for Dr. Christine asked me to give just one suggestion for His Excellency the Ambassador Rashad. I would like to draw your attention, please, for the coastal area in Mauritania, which has a lot of prisoners, and they are prisoners for exactly like my case and because about the same situation. So please focus on the coastal area of Mauritania because they put a lot of people there in jail under that execution.
لأنه موجود في موريتانيا، في مالي، في تشاد، في النيجر، في منطقة هذه المنطقة كلها هي منطقة على الهامش في التقارير الحقوقية، على الهامش في كل شيء، والناس الموجودين فيها هم بشر ويعانوا يوميا.
So he mentioned that this is the coastal area that he meant is also include Mali, Chad, and Niger, 3 countries, which is near Mauritania, and the human rights reports in the UN and all the reports in the world are neglecting them. So he wants to focus on that area, that people should start looking more and deep and put them in the reports.
What a wonderful suggestion, Sheikh. I'm so glad we have the opportunity to have you just have a one-on-one conversation with Ambassador Hussein right now. Let's give him a chance to respond, Ambassador, not to put you on the spot, but would love to share, would love to hear you share maybe a few things that are upcoming that you're excited about, things that you're working on right now. I know we just saw you at the Global Faith Forum in 3 different cities and really excited about what you're doing there. So will you share with us just a couple things that you're working on?
Yeah, no, there's so much important work to be done around the world. You may have seen last week, Secretary Blinken announced our genocide determination concerning the treatment of the Rohingya community. Of course, we've declared the atrocities against the Uyghurs to be a genocide as well. And so we're going to be following up on that genocide determination. We're going to continue to work, of course, on the repression that is occurring in China, including against the Uyghurs. And there's other parts of the world where, in both of those cases, we're talking about Muslim minorities, and we'll continue to follow up on those cases. But I also really want to continue to build on the work, as I spoke about the Global Faith Forum, the protection of religious minorities in Muslim majority countries. We had worked on the Marrakesh Declaration when I was previously in government, and we want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to implement that declaration, to see it through on the ground. We're working closely with our civil society partners. We want to continue, of course, the fight against anti-Semitism. We're seeing anti-Semitism on the rise around the world, including in Europe. That'll continue to be an important part of the work that we do. And the topic today, addressing blasphemy laws, addressing apostasy laws, as a part of my obligation as someone sworn to uphold the Constitution, the constitutional principles of our country. These are laws that go against our First Amendment cherished principle of freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And so we'll defend that around the world. And I do think that there are those that are speaking up in many of these countries saying that these laws fly against Islamic principles as well, in terms of apostasy, the Quranic tradition of la ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in religion. And so there are voices that are making that point clear, and there are voices that are making the point clear on blasphemy laws, that oftentimes it's the criminalization of what's considered blasphemy that just increases the amplification of the speech that's deemed blasphemous. And so oftentimes you have a policy argument where if those that are not deemed to be engaging in blasphemy are not criminalized, then you're actually better off, because that quote unquote blasphemous speech will probably not be as widely seen or distributed or as amplified as if when the government takes action and tries to eliminate that speech. So we're seeing some positive developments around the world, but there's still a lot of work to be done in this area.
Absolutely, yes. That was very encouraging when we were there in Keller, Texas at the Global Faith Forum and heard Dr. Al-Isa, Muslim World Alliance leader, share the work that he had done on the Charter of Mecca. So thank you for highlighting that. Quickly, Chair Mansa, thank you so much again for joining us. We know that right now USCIRF is looking for reauthorization. Do you want to share with us just a few words on that, why we need to do that, and sort of what USCIRF adds to this space?
Sure. So we are looking to be reauthorized. A bill was just dropped in the Senate on March 22nd with 6 senators, bipartisan, unanimous for a straight reauthorization for 2 years, led by Marco Rubio and Dick Durbin, James Langford, Chris Coons, Bob Menendez, and Jim Risch. So as you can see, there's, we've met with all of the offices. They're all very pleased with the work that USCIRF does and how important it is to have this independent voice, that doesn't consider the bilateral issues when they're looking at countries and they are able to call a spade, regardless of how good of a friend a country is to us. I think sometimes that's very difficult, of course, for the US government to do. And to just be that barometer that kind of is always apples to apples, that is able to just talk about, like we've seen countries, go in the right direction. We're able to talk about that, but that's that independent monitor. And having been here, and seen it for the last 4 years, it's seen even more important it is to have that organization, the USERF, be reauthorized so we can continue this work. Obviously, we'd love at some point to be a permanent reauthorization, but we're thrilled with the second, 2-year authorization. So I know a bill will be being dropped. I know Representative Chris Smith and McGovern have talked about that coming up soon on the House side. And so we'd obviously hope that these would pass quickly, and we can move on and continue doing our important work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Panelists, we are at the conclusion of our question and answer. Thank you so much, all of you, once again, for being here, for your very important work as it relates to eliminating blasphemy and apostasy laws and the death penalty for such things. Thank you so much. You can turn off your video, mute your mics. Speaking of the United States Congress, we are pleased to welcome Congressman Jamie Raskin has joined us, and many of you will remember that he was the sponsor in the House side for a resolution that passed during the 116th Congress. Maybe he can give us an update on what he's thinking of this year. Just to welcome him, give you a little bit of a bio. Congressman Jamie Raskin proudly represents Maryland's 8th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. The district includes Montgomery, Carroll, Frederick counties. Congressman Raskin was sworn into his 3rd term at the beginning of this 117th Congress. And he is serving his 3rd term on the House Judiciary Committee, the Committee on Oversight Reform, and the Committee on House Administration. Very important work. Mr. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to take your full time.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Titus, for having me. The resolution passed the House of Representatives on a vote of 386 to 3. So that's about as overwhelming as it gets around here. And we can talk about the 3 objections later, but it does seem to be a near unanimous sentiment in Congress as well as in the country that we do have something to teach the rest of the world about religious freedom and religious tolerance. It was our framers who rebelled against centuries of theocracy, religious superstition, wars of religion between the Catholics and the Protestants, holy inquisition and crusades, witchcraft trials, and the rest in order to pass our First Amendment. And we didn't separate the church and state immediately. It has been a process in our history, but this is something that we are rightfully and justly proud of, and we should be standing up for religious freedom around the world. And the blasphemy laws, the heresy laws, the apostasy laws, the witchcraft laws, all of these are remnants of a medieval past where we essentially tried people, prosecuted people, persecuted people, crucified people for thought crimes, for thinking and feeling differently about matters of faith and religion and worship and personal belief. So the fact that we still have more than 60 countries around the world where people can be tried and imprisoned and executed in some cases for apostasy, heresy, blasphemy, and so on, is an absolute scandal. So we got it through the House. We didn't get the resolution through the Senate. I'm delighted that Senator Lankford is going to be reintroducing it in the Senate. Of course, we will be able to pass it again in the House of Representatives. But the United States should be aggressively opposing the tyranny and the persecution of religious dissenters. Now, the worst case of it, of course, is with the death penalty, because the death penalty is irreversible and it's permanent. It's, of course, bad enough to make anybody spend 1 hour, much less 1 day, much less 1 year or 1 decade in jail for being a religious dissenter, but the idea of executing them is simply barbaric and a crime against human rights and a crime against humanity. So I would argue that this is something that should be unifying us across the political spectrum, across the religious spectrum, across the spectrum of belief and non-belief in America. And it's something that we should be advancing strongly as a country.
Thank you so much, Congressman Raskin, unifying us across borders, across boundaries, and unifying us as a country. I think those are strong words, and I wish we could do that in more areas. So we'll continue to strive towards that goal. Thank you so much again for joining us. Friends, we have a really great little engagement opportunity for you right now. If you look in your chat, you're going to see a link where you can enter a word. So if you click this menti.com link that's in your chat, it will pop up with a web browser, and you can quickly enter in a word that says, what is key for repealing the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy laws? Many of you might have seen these little word clouds, and we're going to do some creative artwork with this as it relates to the Earth Summit in the summer in Washington, D.C. So if you could please help us out. And right now, if you had one key word for repealing the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy, what would that word be? And you can enter that in through that link. And we will show the results of that in a few minutes. So thank you so much for engaging with us, and we hope to get some great words there. So now let's welcome our next guest. Let's see here. So next up is Dr. Jeannette Buckingham of the World Evangelical Alliance. Dr. Buckingham lives in Ottawa, Canada, and has served as the Director of Global Advocacy for WEA since July of 2021. She is a professor of political studies at Trinity Western University with a research focus on religious freedom law and in Canada and internationally. She also serves as co-director for the International Institute for Religious Freedom and the executive editor of the International Journal for Religious Freedom. Dr. Buckingham, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Dr. Christine. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this very important webinar. The World Evangelical Alliance Global Advocacy Department's mandate is to be a global voice for evangelicals in the public square, primarily the voice of our 145 national alliances at the various UN agencies in Geneva, New York, and Bonn. In his report on the death penalty in 2020, the UN Secretary General stressed that the death penalty must never be imposed as a sanction for specific forms of nonviolent conduct, such as apostasy and blasphemy. His 2022 report will be presented in September to the Human Rights Council. So we'll watch for a reiteration of this statement. The UN Human Rights Committee in July of 2011 adopted General Comment 34 on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which states, prohibitions of displays of lack of respect for religion or other belief systems, including blasphemy laws, are incompatible with the covenant. Apostasy and blasphemy laws criminalizing practices. I'm gonna share a screen because I feel like we need a map for this. All right. So here is our map showing where apostasy is punishable by death. In Afghanistan, Iran, Malaysia, Maldives, Mauritania, Nigeria, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. It is a criminal offense in an additional 7. Blasphemy is punishable in 83 countries. The death penalty may be applied in 7 of those: Afghanistan, Iran, Mauritania, Nigeria, Pakistan, Somalia, and Saudi Arabia. We need to know where in the world this is happening in order to be able to address it. In its interim report in October of 2021, I'll stop sharing now here. In October 2021, the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, Ahmed Shahid, reiterated UN calls for all states to repeal anti-blasphemy and anti-apostasy laws, since they undermine both freedom of religion or belief and the ability to have healthy dialogue and debates on a wide variety of human concerns, including religion or belief. In March 2021, over 50 states made a joint statement during the UN Human Rights Council's 46th session, urging the abolition of the death penalty for apostasy or blasphemy. And I quote, remove the possibility of that penalty being imposed or carried out both in practice and in law, and release individuals currently on death row or otherwise imprisoned for these offenses. And the statement underscores the Secretary General's comment that these laws have a significant chilling effect on the legitimate exercise of human rights. And I raised the case, the recent case in Pakistan that was so well publicized of Asia Bibi. She was the first woman in Pakistan to be sentenced to death for blasphemy. And the story behind it is just so incredulous. She was a farm laborer who brought water to a group of women who were also farm laborers, and she took a drink before the Muslim women took a drink. And they were very offended by that. There's no evidence that Bibi said or did anything that could conceivably fall within the blasphemy laws. Her trial sparked widespread violence. 2 government officials who defended her and called for revision of the blasphemy laws were murdered. Finally, in 2018, the Supreme Court of Pakistan acquitted Bibi due to lack of evidence. And the protests were so violent that she had to be kept in hiding before she was spirited out of the country. And she's now a refugee, still anonymously in Canada. Christian organizations and human rights NGOs advocated for her release and pressured the government of Pakistan to release her, creating an international spotlight on the tangible harms of blasphemy laws. Tragically, these issues still continue in Pakistan, and as we have heard, in other countries as well. I will note that the Special Rapporteur, Ahmed Shahid, is ending his term soon, and we need to ensure that the next Special Rapporteur for the United Nations is someone who will take positive steps and continue pressure on this important issue of the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy. And the WEA welcomes all the existing and future advocacy for adherence to international human rights norms on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Buckingham, for being here and sharing those graphics. I'm personally a visual learner, and we've already had many requests for those maps, and I've assured everyone the webinar is being recorded and will be available to you shortly after this. We will include our contact information so you can get a hold of that, anyone who has asked for that. Let's welcome our last but not least presenter today, Anne Walda. Welcome, Anne. So everyone, she is the executive director of the Jubilee campaign since 1991. And we are so excited to have her here today. It's actually she who nominated me to be co-chair of this committee. And thank you so much for that. I don't think I've been able to share that with you in person. So a little bit about her. She focuses on international religious freedom, advocating for the release of prisoners of conscience and resettlement of refugees, combating trafficking, for protection of children, and providing support for victims. And your work is to be admired and very admirable, and we are so excited to have you here. Please feel free to share for a couple minutes things that you're excited about that the Jubilee campaign is working on. It looks like we won't have time for the Q&A at the end, but again, we'll share contact information for everyone. Thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to participate in this briefing and tie together domestic and international advocacy. More specifically, how the United States can support the United Nations in the global cause of eliminating the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy. There have been a few noteworthy recent steps in the right direction towards safeguarding the right to freedom of religion and belief. In 2020, Sudan's civilian-led transitional government ratified the Miscellaneous Amendments Act, which repealed the crime of apostasy, which was awesome. Also in 2020, the United States House of Representatives passed legislation calling for an end to apostasy, blasphemy, and heresy laws, as just described by Congressman Jamie Raskin. We applaud this, and we ask for the Senate to be encouraging passage as well of this bill that Senator Langford has tabled. More recently, in March 2021, more than 50 member states of the Human Rights Council signed a joint statement calling on, quote, those states where the death penalty remains an available punishment for blasphemy or apostasy to remove the possibility of that penalty being imposed or carried out both in practice and in law, unquote. Thank you, Janet Buckingham, for your excellent presentation of the countries where this is an ongoing situation that needs to be changed. Now we must follow up with an even greater action. And currently there are 4 resolutions up for a vote, again, this fall at the United Nations General Assembly, that we can engage with meaningfully in our capacity as advocates for fundamental human rights and religious freedoms. First, there's the UN General Assembly resolution on extrajudicial summary or arbitrary executions. Second, there's the UN General Assembly resolution for a moratorium on the death penalty. Third, there's the UN General Assembly resolution combating intolerance, negative stereotyping, stigmatization, discrimination, incitement to violence, and violence against persons based on religion or belief. And finally, there's a UN General Assembly resolution on the freedom of religion or belief. These each are crucial resolutions that in which we can embed language regarding the abolition of the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy. Both the resolution on extrajudicial executions and the resolution on a moratorium on the use of the death penalty briefly note that religious minorities have been targeted for killings and death sentences on the grounds of their manifestation of faith. And therefore, it would be timely and relevant to insert paragraphs that expound on these observations and insert sentences that condemn this intersection of religious persecution and arbitrary deprivation of life. Also, while the resolution on religious-based intolerance and the resolution on freedom of religion or belief denounce violence against faith minorities, they should include more specific language that emphasizes that death, either by judicial killings or the implementation of capital punishment, is the most egregious manifestation of faith-based intolerance and therefore must be eradicated. Numerous human rights organizations have observed an expanding global support for abolishing the death penalty, such that in 2019, the number of corroborating execution was actually at its lowest in the past decade. This is good, but not enough. and the number of that the number of Human Rights Council member states who have signed onto the moratorium of the death penalty has actually increased each year since 2007. We must encourage that number to continue to increase. It is essential that we link the advocacy of death penalty abolition activities and the freedom of religion or belief activists on this topic. The UN General Secretary, Antonio Guterres, made clear in his annual report on the question of the death penalty that capital punishment, quote, should especially not be imposed as a sanction for forms of nonviolent conduct such as apostasy, blasphemy, adultery, and consensual same-sex relations, unquote. We must encourage all nations to align with this principle and abolish the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy laws. No one should be punished for their faith choice. We are pleased that earlier this month, 7 countries co-sponsored our UN Human Rights Council side event entitled Protecting Life, Repealing the Death Penalty for Apostasy and Blasphemy, which we held on March 8th, 2022 at the Mission of the Netherlands in Geneva. The 7 countries were Australia, Chile, Denmark, the Netherlands, Sierra Leone, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The United States must continue to take up this cause as a primary sponsor or co-sponsor and push towards the embedding of language in the 4 international agreements referenced earlier. We look forward to cooperation with the government of the United States. Now, I sincerely hope that all of our attendees today will take up this necessary cause. And we thank you again for inviting me to speak and for presenting how we can work together in the days ahead and at the UN General Assembly this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. What wonderful parting words for us today. I know, friends, we've gone a little bit over time. Just wanted to quickly round up and just share our contact information with you. If you are interested in staying in touch with the committee on eliminating blasphemy and apostasy laws, please feel free to email me, Christine@nae.org, in order to be added to that listserv. Like I said, this webinar will be recorded, and we are just so grateful for all of your work. We know many advocates who are doing many amazing things globally are on with us today. As for the very first point that we did not get to in our webinar, which is what has gone on with that appropriations funding at USAID and what projects have they instituted since FY21 appropriations funding. We have heard back from USAID. They are following up with us on that, and we hope to have them in to explain more about what they've been working on at the summit in Washington, DC. So please also sign up for the summit in DC, and we will see you there. For now, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and best of luck, and we'll be praying for all of your work going forward. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.